Hello, I'm Ed Needham, editor of the fabulous literary magazine Strong Words, and this is my podcast, The 5 Rules of Writing. In each episode, I speak to a most excellent writer in a particular genre about how they do it. And if you'd like to know more about Strong Words, and specifically how to subscribe, go to www.strong-words.co.uk and you'll be whisked straight to the website. Hello and welcome to the 5 Rules of Writing, brought to you by Strong Words magazine. Now, this is a podcast where I talk to writers about the 5 things they know to be true in writing whatever it is that they write for a living. So whether they spend their days writing lyrics for operas or parking tickets, there are some aspects of their work that are absolutely non-negotiable. Now, today, I'm very excited to welcome our first ever French guest. He is a film director, screenwriter and novelist, and his second novel, 100 Million Years and a Day, was published in English in the UK last year and was one of Strong Words' top 20 books of 2020. If you haven't read it, and I urge you to, it's about a man on a quest. He is a professor of paleontology, that's dinosaurs, in a not very exciting department at a rather ordinary French university, but he is overwhelmed by 2 powerful forces. The first is his desire to overcome childhood humiliations, and the second is that he is tormented by a story about something a man once glimpsed in a cave a century earlier. He doesn't know where the cave is, but he cannot get this story out of his mind. So it's a story of a person whose obsession pushes him to extremes high in the mountains. And it's a magnificent book. So here to talk about the challenges of writing that difficult second novel, I'd like to welcome to the 5 Rules of Writing, Jean-Baptiste Andrea.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Now, apologies for my difficult pronunciation of your name, and congratulations on 100 Million Years and a Day. Are you obsessed with dinosaurs and mountains?
I am obsessed with mountains, for sure. It's an environment and that I really love, to the point that I'm actually considering going to live in the mountains at this point in my life. Dinosaurs, no, it's more something that comes from my childhood. I guess like most people as a little boy, I wasn't obsessed. I actually had a phase where I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was told that I could not become a writer because it wasn't a real job. And so I thought, hey, what else could I do? And then paleontology seemed very appealing, even though I'm not a scientific mind at all. And I realized it's the storytelling aspect of paleontology that was a big draw for me. And I'm putting actually those words in the book.
Okay.
That's how the dinosaurs ending up in my book.
Okay. Now, why haven't we seen your first novel, Maren, in English?
Very good question. You should ask publishers. I got very, very good feedback because I saw the feedback that I got from scouts and publishers from the UK about this first book. And I think the people who read it enjoyed it, but there's a business side to all of this, which is the reason why the first book wasn't published. I think it's that the foreign language market in the UK is very small. I think it's maybe 1.5% of the market or something. And it's already crowded with, very established foreign writers. And so it's very hard for a newcomer, understandably, to just find a bit of space for himself or herself on this very crowded market, because there's only so many books you can publish. The specificity of the Anglo-Saxon market is that you have a huge production in your own language in English. You have stuff from Australia, Canada, the US, England. So because of this wealth of English writers, English language authors, there isn't much room for foreign writers.
Okay.
So I was actually lucky that the second book was published. I don't know why, actually. I don't know why.
Well, I think your publisher, Gallic Books, is published by Gallic in the UK. They do some absolutely tremendous books. They're a publisher that I really admire, and so I hopefully will see your first book shortly. But what made you decide, Jean-Baptiste, that you were going to add novelist to your CV? After all, you're a film director, screenwriter. You have some pretty formidable jobs already.
Yes. Well, I worked in the film industry for 15 years, and I was indeed a screenwriter and a director. I mostly directed this. Well, I actually exclusively directed the stuff that I wrote. And after 15, 20 years, I started feeling very frustrated with the film world, with the fact that so much money is involved that from the minute you put your pen to paper or finger to keyboard, you immediately think, can I do this? Can I write this? Is it doable? Is it doable as in, is it acceptable is it acceptable for the audience? Or more prosaically, can it be financed? Mm-hmm. The second book is set in the mountains in the snow. This is typically the kind of story I would probably not have written as a movie, because it's just, I know how hard it is to shoot in this kind of environment. So it would make it more expensive. And as a result, it would probably be harder than any other film to finance. With novels, there are no limits. Mm-hmm. I can do anything I want. I can have elephants battling on the moon, and it's all free. And I can work with actors who throw no tantrums, who have no crazy requirements, cost no money, whom I don't have to babysit. So this was very appealing. It was really about freedom for me, artistic freedom. It's not a coincidence that the first book, Maren, which means My Queen, is the story of a boy who runs away from a home being an old gas station where he lives with his parents, who runs away from home in a quest for freedom, for personal freedom. I did not realize actually that parallel between the story of this book and my personal quest, but that's what it was. So it was all about freedom. That's the short answer.
Okay. And where do you stand on the sort of this unwritten law that says the correct number of words for a novelist to write each day is 500?
I had no idea there was such a law, by the way. So now I'm actually quite stressed by that.
Well, it's the unwritten law because it comes up so often when I ask people how many, what's your sort of daily output, or if you have a daily output, how many words do you normally write? So many of them say 500. Someone's told them that's what they have to do.
No, I envy that ability. I actually, when I was in the film business, and it's funny that I call it a business. It's probably quite interesting. I don't call literature a business, even though it is one. But when I was in the film industry and I wrote basically every day, I've been writing every day for 20 years. But as soon as I wrote my first novel, it became something different. I write in a sudden, I have an idea and it's an outburst, which is going to last 4 months. But if I do not have that idea, then I have to wait. I just have to wait and do nothing. So when I read about Jack London getting up early in the morning and writing really much more than 500 words from 5 in the morning to 12 and then starting drinking, I'm kind of like, hey, that's cool. You can have a huge output and then you can drink on top of that. Well, that didn't work very well for him in the end because I think it killed him. But wow, but I cannot do that. I cannot sit at my desk and just write. I don't want to do that. It's actually one of my rules is that you have to have a precise plan as to what you have to write. So I don't sit and write. Okay. I don't do that. I only do it once I have everything laid out.
From Strong Words magazine, these are the 5 rules of writing. All right, let's get onto your 5 rules then, Jean-Baptiste. And this first rule, it could go either way. It's you say treat every novel like it's your first, which means there are no rules about writing a second novel. Is this good or bad news? I feel it could be. It's very liberating, but also it could be there is no process of education.
Well, no, it's this cliche that the only rule is that there are no rules. What happened to me basically is that after my first movie, which was a horror movie called Dead End in 2001, I had some kind of panic attack as to what my second movie, which was Big Nothing, a movie I made with Simon Pegg and David Schwimmer. I had a panic attack about what that second movie should be, would have to be, how I would finance it, what were people expecting of me. And as a result, I did not, and that panic attack, as it usually does, didn't do anything. It didn't help. It didn't make me create something. So it left me dry for 2 years. And then when I stopped worrying about it, that second movie came about, and suddenly it was clear to me what I wanted to write. So I remember thinking at the time, never again. I'm never again going to put that kind of pressure on myself. I'm never again going to wonder, what should I do? What are people expecting? So that's that. When I said the first, every novel should be treated as the first, it's because when you write your first novel, most of the authors would agree with that, you have total freedom. Because you don't have much to lose. People are not expecting anything because they don't know you. So there is usually this very genuine, honest, eager, magical thing coming out of you. That's what it means. That's what I mean by that.
Okay. I once tried to write a novel, and having written it, one thing I realized is that it's much harder to write than I realized. Is it, having written one, is it then kind of, do you feel you're much more aware of the problems, the challenge, the amount of time you've got to carve out, just the practicalities of it?
No, I think it actually becomes harder and harder because you hone your craft for sure. No, but it's true. The third
this is
one,
terrible news.
I know. No, but it becomes hard. It's like I have this funny image and parallel that it's like drugs. Your first movie is like a doobie, and I don't do drugs, by the way. So, okay, now that's disclaimer. I'm not condoning. I have some excessive behavior, but not drugs. Anyway, it's like a little doobie. First book, oh, that's nice. Hey, I like that. I have to do that again. Hey, let's try cocaine. A second book, that's even more fun. Third book, which I just published, it was heroin for me. I was completely into it. I almost didn't come out of my study for 4 months. Puts your marriage in jeopardy, but that's because you're more and more into it. You master your tools more and more, and you want to explore new things. You want to go further. You want to lose yourself in that world more and more, deeper and deeper. That's why I find it harder. I don't find it harder to tell a story. It's just that, of course, you mature, you want to make it more complex and all these things. So, but I think I am a professional writer, whether for screen or books, but I do not consider myself a professional writer in that I cannot just get up and go to work tomorrow. I do not know if I have another book in me. And I always think about, okay, don't worry about it. Think about Harper Lee, about, all these people who wrote one great book. And I've been lucky enough to write 3 books. I hope there's going to be more, but I don't want to force it. And that's why I don't have this, okay, I'm going to get up tomorrow and write 500 words. Doesn't mean anything to me. I have to have something to share with you.
Okay. Now then, your second rule, I think, is a really interesting one. You say, love each and every character. I mean, this sounds a bit like something I would expect someone from film with a film background to say, love each and every character, even the ones you want the readers to hate. How does a writer love the characters?
How does a writer not love his characters is more a question I'm wondering sometimes. I've come to realize when I don't like a book and it's well written, okay? And I'm wondering, I actually had this mental exercise recently. why is this book not working? Because of course, when you learn screenwriting, there's a lot of analysis to know how it's done. So I'm always thinking, okay, this book is obviously well written. The author is well known. Okay, not only do I not like this book, but I think it's a bad book. Why? And most of the time it's two things: lack of humor. So even when you're dealing with a very complex and serious subject, I think humor is, and you guys in Britain have the best sense of humor in the world. And I married an English woman, and that's just very important for me to be able to treat something very dark with humor. When it's not there, I think it's a problem. And the second thing is, there is sometimes a feeling that the writer did not like his characters, did not care for them, did not give them enough attention. And it was especially important for me in my third book, which is called Des Diables et des Saints, Devils and Saints, which is going to be published by Gallic in English next year. It was particularly important because it's set in an orphanage, and some of the characters are really awful. But I did not want them to be James Bond type villains. Mm-hmm. I wanted the audience to understand their faults, to understand where their darkness was coming from. And as a result, you have to love these guys. Even the baddies were born as pink, sweet babies. And mm-hmm. what happened to them along the way to turn them into these baddies? I think when this is there, and you actually create depth. It's not a cardboard cutout, your baddie. It's a fully fleshed human being. And that's what I mean by that. You have the audience, the readers and the audience too in a movie have to relate. A good baddie in a movie is one you relate to.
Yes, but some people in the world are truly despicable, aren't they? I agree that in books we tend to like bad people, or we certainly perhaps like people more when they show their failings or their mistakes or their dark side. But some people really are genuinely vile.
No, but when I think about somebody I really, really, really do not like Donald Trump, mm-hmm. I catch myself thinking, okay, but I know that this guy's behavior is the behavior of a child. Mm-hmm. And when you study that guy's history, he was desperate for his father's approval, which he never got. And you get this kind of spoiled, tantrum-prone brat who grew up in a rich environment, desperate to get his father's approval. When you see this horrible guy who represents everything I hate and despise in the world today, there is this child behind. And I think it's important to understand where evil is coming from, because that's the only way to fight it, to prevent it from happening. I don't think people are born evil, and some people are born evil, and some people are born good people. So I think it's important to always see that little twinkle of light, which has disappeared in some people or is hidden, but it's there somewhere.
Okay. Now I see in your film past, you once made a film with the fabulous Audrey floreaux, who plays one of my all-time favorite characters in anything, whether film, book, or real life. She's Josephine Carlson in Spiral or Engrenage, as you could call it. And she's not a particularly likable character, is she? And she doesn't care whether anybody likes her or not. It really doesn't seem to bother her. It's so anyway, I just wanted to say I think she's absolutely fabulous.
And she's a lovely person in real life, by the way. She's one of the actors I worked with which didn't need any babysitting or anything. She was really, really lovely.
Okay, I'm glad to hear.
So that's good news for you. You can still idolize her.
Yes, she is just fantastic. Anyway, the third point, which is also an excellent, this of all the sort of times I've talked to people about with their 5 rules, this may be my favorite rule of all so far. So your rule 3 is get to the point. And also, your book, it has one of Strong Words' favorite qualities. It's quite short. So was it initially a huge book that you had to kind of shave down, or how do you make sure you get to the point?
I'm very impatient as a person. I just have to get things done. I cannot stand uncertainty. And when you tell me I have to be someplace, I just have to go there. Or if you tell me something and I understand where you're going, I just cut everything that's not necessary. I know what you're trying to say. Let's move forward in the discussion. So I have it's not a quality, by the way, or not always. I'm very impatient. And so when I write and I have my story laid out in front of me in my notebook, every time I write a scene, there is a part of me which enjoys writing that particular scene, and another part of me that wants to move to the next one because it looks so appealing, that next scene too. So I don't write a lot of stuff and then cut stuff out. I just write very economically and very tight from the beginning, and I write short books or relatively short books which are meant to resonate. I build the books in a particular way whereby I write very short. I love poetry too, and there's a little bit of that hopefully in the books. So I write very short chapters or paragraphs, which then I spread more than the usual paragraphs to indicate to the reader that he or she has to stop there and let the paragraph resonate. So I'm trying to not describe things, to not force feed the audience with an abundance of details, but just give them an outline and let their imagination fill that picture. And so there is a bit of a collaborative thing happening between the reader and the writer, which I really love.
Right.
And that means naturally get to the point and use as little words as you can to describe a situation, which is probably something I took from the film world.
Okay. I mean, novelists are traditionally a group of people who very much do not get to the point. No, they take a long time they take their own sweet time to make whatever point it is they're trying to make. Do you get impatient reading other writers, or which writers do you get most impatient with, or what aspects of writing do you get most impatient?
No, for example, I'm just in a Steinbeck phase, and he writes big books, and I just find them magnificent. Or Umberto Eco, I love Umberto Eco. He writes really big books. I find them magnificent. I just don't write like that, but as a reader, I have no problem with that. But it's suddenly writing. What happens to you the first time you write is, it's like somebody getting in the shower in the morning and started singing and realizing, hey, I have a little bit of a voice, and then you discover your own voice, and you might want to be a bass or a something else, or a soprano or whatever. Although if you can be both, that's probably a bit of a problem. But or a baritone, but suddenly you realize, hey, after all, I'm a tenor, and I wanted to be a bass, but I'm the tenor. That's how I do it. So writing is that I had no preset plan as to how I would write. It's just that's how it comes. That's how it pours out.
Okay. Now, your fourth rule. This is a slightly more difficult one. You say disappear as the author.
Yes.
Leave no fingerprint. Yeah. This is very enigmatic.
Yes, I know. It's actually linked. It's a perception that I have, which is hard to share, but I'm going to try. It's actually linked to the previous rule. I'm going to give you a very concrete example, actually. My first book, again, Maren, is the story of a 12-year-old boy who everybody calls a retard, and he's just different. And he's treated horribly by everybody, including his father. He decides to run away. Every time I sat down to write this book, and I wrote this book in little bursts of 3 pages a day, that was very specific to this book. This boy has a vision of the world and a language which is quite specific. And the reason I ended up writing 3 pages a day and not more is that after about 3 pages, I started to put words into this guy's mouth. He's called Shell, this boy. I started putting words into his mouth which sounded fake, like I was trying to be funny.
Okay.
But not like that guy was speaking. The reason this book was successful is because people come to me all the time and told me, how is this guy so realistic? It's like he exists. Do you know this person? I said, no, he's fictitious. But I became him for 3 pages. And then I became myself again, Jean-Baptiste Andrea, writing a book. It's exactly like when you see in movies 9-year-old kids saying funny things they would actually never say in real life. This is when the author doesn't disappear. This is when the author leaves big, fat, greasy fingerprints all over his or her story, saying, hey, look at how funny I am. So you have to become your story. You have to become each and every character. And people who open the book have to think, fuck, this is real. This thing is real. Right. That's why I do not like big descriptions, long, lengthy flourishes, because this is typically an author's print. Real life is an instant perception of things.
Right.
So it's these point 3 and 4 kind of go hand in hand.
And that's very interesting, because I've just written about in the next issue of Strong Words, which comes out in next week, about how Mario Puzo wrote The Godfather, and he was a man who had quite literary aspirations, and he wasn't making any money out of his highbrow literature, so he wrote something which was a bit more mainstream, a bit more pulpy, and he wrote The Godfather. And even though he grew up in New York and he grew up in a sort of poor Italian family, he said he'd never actually met a member of the Mafia. He knew about kind of crime on the street, but he never once met. He said, and he felt quite embarrassed about it. He said, I never met anybody who's actually in the Mafia. And when The Godfather came out, some very senior Mafia figures, internationally famous now Mafia figures, came up to him and refused to believe that he wasn't somehow deeply involved personally in Mafia life. They just wouldn't have it. He said, I'm really sorry. It's all from research and my imagination. And, so the fact that he was able to convince the kind of people that he was actually writing about that he had a direct line to the kind of way in which they thought and spoke, even though it was all from research, I found quite extraordinary that he was able to effectively fool them, to deceive them into thinking that. So, I mean,
it is the power of fiction. It is the power of fiction. I received a letter about my first book from a doctor saying this is a fantastic clinical diagnosis of, and there was a series of technical terms I couldn't understand about the condition of this child, but I didn't even do research. I actually myself did not give any known condition to this kid. He doesn't have a condition. He's just strange. And I did not want to pigeonhole him into either autism or any other form of pathology or specific problems. But still, this doctor recognized clinical signs, very precise clinical signs of something. So this is quite marvelous. This is, again, as you rightly said about Mario Puzo, a way of disappearing and letting your story be so emotionally powerful that it becomes true. And even if some details are not exactly true, they are glossed over by people who know, and they just see the truth of the story.
Right. I mean, do you know how you did it, though? How did you put yourself into the position of this boy?
It's just that that's how I know I want to tell a story. It becomes an obsession, and I want to become the character, and I want to live that adventure through that character. That's why I find it impossible to sit and just write. There is a strong desire in me to go somewhere else, to become somewhere else for a time.
Okay. Now then, your fifth one is a more practical piece of advice. You say, plan ahead. Do not write expecting something great to come up during the process. How meticulous are you in your plans? I guess this is part of the film background, right? Where
yes.
You have to know every shot in advance.
Yes, this is also the rule I hate the most, by the way. I because it's very. I mean, it feels stifling at first when you have an idea, and the first thing you want to do, every writer, is just write, because it's the moment where it's great. But by the way, this rule is controversial. I always have friendly fights with friends or other authors about that. Mm-hmm. Some people just write, but these people will usually end up telling you, yes, sometimes you get stuck, and okay, so you let it rest for a couple of months. I don't want that. I don't want to miss a fork in the road of the storytelling and stop because I've reached a dead end and not know where I took the wrong road and have to deconstruct everything or start from scratch. So as soon as I have my story, which basically means a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's what I call a story. I know where I'm going. I have a narrative, storyline. As soon as I'm there, I'm thinking, stop. Now starts the hard part and the most boring bit, which is flesh it out. Okay. And so it takes me about a month to, I have a notepad here to structure the story. Once I have this whole story, which I would compare to the pillars of a bridge, that the name is big, yeah. Then I'm free to improvise between these big pillars. I'm going to add, of course, stuff that's not in my notebook, that's not in the plans. The stuff happens when you write, but I know where I'm going every time. If I'm jumping from one point to another, I know I'm not going to fall in the rapids below and be taken away and die. I know if I jump, I'm going to fall on solid stone, and then from that solid stone, I'm going to be able to jump on the other one and then reach the other bank. That's what I call planning ahead. Not everybody does that, but it's very important to me. I think it's
Yes, I mean I've just also been writing about Gone Girl, Gillian Flynn's book Gone Girl, which has this gigantic twist in the middle. Everything depends on this great shock right in the middle of the story. And she said that when she sat down to write that, she had no plans at all about what was going to happen. She just sat down and started writing. So something which is so, which depends on this absolutely key structural element in the middle. She had no anticipation of it. Have you tried that approach?
No, because and I don't want to. No, because that's just the exception to the rule. For one Gone Girl, there's 1 million unknown titles,
right?
Which didn't go anywhere. Well, by the way, your book, how did you write it? Did you just start with a tiny wisp of an idea, or did you make a plan?
Well, I can't really. I think I did have a plan. I knew where it was going, but I didn't really plot it out like a military campaign. I think I knew what it was, and I knew it was going to end up, but it was a sort of vague rather than really sharp focused thing.
To be more precise, actually, and practical, in the book we're talking about today, 100 million years in a day, just to give you a very precise example, the character of Yuri, I don't want to talk too much about him, but the character of Yuri happened during the writing. Now, the character of Yuri wasn't there when I started writing. And it's only when I reached that point in the story that I thought, I need something else. I need more salt in the recipe. Normally I have all my characters, first book, third book, no new character appeared during the writing, other things appeared. In this one, Yuri was a character which suddenly popped out of the story. So not everything is planned.
Okay, is he the old guy, the mountain guide?
No,
is that
Yuri? If I say who he is, I'm gonna. I'm gonna spoil the thing. He's Peter's friend.
Okay,
the young paleontologist friend, the German guy.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, we won't talk about that anymore then, because people have to read it for themselves. Yes. And your next book, you say there are plans for that to come out in the UK?
Yes, I think next year. Yeah, it came out in France in January, and Gallic took it for the UK, so I think it's going to come out next year.
Okay, fantastic. Well, in the meantime, everybody can get their teeth into 100 million years and a day. It really is superb, and it's an adventure. It's a man sort of losing control of himself. It's the perils of becoming obsessed and determined. There are so many things in there that everybody, I think, can identify with. And I hugely enjoyed it. I'm very much looking forward to your next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you. I had a great time.
From Strong Words magazine, these are the 5 rules of writing.